The church is quite literally the patriarchat, the church patriarchy, and is apparently charged with protecting the patriarchal soul of the nation. So when Pussy Riot is referred to as those girls acting recklessly and destructively, infected by a foreign liberalism, infecting the nation with their disease, they are discounted as feminist critics, as theorists, as political performers, as those whose political expression is an explicit critique of the illegitimate and anti-democratic state and its clerical allies. They have to be hooligans, otherwise they are political actors and theorists, feminists even, with a performative critique of power. And that performance and critique, I would say that feminism strikes at the heart, not of the soul, but of existing power. I was sure you were the police. The allegations seek to discount.
But I thought it might be interesting just to talk about the travels of gender for a brief moment. When and I think I say this in the piece, when gender trouble was first proposed to be translated into French, the publisher Fayard said it was an inassimilable, which is of course the word used for unwanted migrants, and then other people in Paris, mainly in about the three arrondissements, which speak for France. Well, it's true. I mean, because the French, it's like, you mean the 5th, 6th, and maybe, some part of either the 4th or the 7th. Anyway. But others said, oh, it's the McDonaldization of the French Academy, or something terrible. And then, of course, gender became something that you could say in French, which was very interesting, especially hearing people say gender. And there was gender studies. And they even established a couple of chairs in gender studies, which was fabulous. And, with some pride, I think, although there were other people who thought, no, let's keep femininity in relationship to gender, or let's keep la différence sexuelle in relationship to gender, or, different ways of handling that. Différence des sexes seem to be different from différence sexuelle and gender. Anyway, it was hard to track, but I saw that there were many different things going on. And of course, also queer. It's not just that gender doesn't translate into some languages, and it does not, but gender is really hard to translate at all, because calling someone a gender, or being called a gender, or being treated as a gender, it is enigmatic. There's something enigmatic. What is expected of me? What does this term want of me? I was in a hotel room last week in London, and a gentleman came and knocked on the door, and I was very busy. And he said, excuse me, I'm here to check the mini bar. Excuse me, Mr. Madam, Mr. Madam, Mr. Madam, Mr. Madam, Mr. Madam, Mr. Madam, like that. And I could tell he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop. He was just panicked. He was panicked. And I saw he got more rigid. Mr. Madam, Mr. Madam. And I saw it was really obligatory that I intervene and try to handle the anxiety. And I was a little bit irascible, and I said, let me ask you something. Is it really important to determine my gender in order to check the and then, of course, the problem is he was so polite that he said, of course not, Mr. Madam, Mr. Anyway, you could say it was a kind of cruelty on my part not to have alleviated his anxiety, but for some reason I was feeling kind of truculent, and I wasn't able to do it. Although I guess feeling bad about it, the next day I was in the swimming pool in the same hotel, and I was getting dressed, and a woman came in. I think I was mainly dressed, I think so. And a woman and her friend came in, a young woman, and she said, "Oh, I think I must be in the wrong place here." And she said, "Let's go ask." And she said, "Do the ladies and the blokes both change in here?" And I said, "No." And then I realized she was really freaked out. And I think I was feeling guilty about the other guy. So I just said, "I'm a lady." And she looked at me. It was the first time in my life I've ever said that. But you know what? At a certain point, you just get, it's like, oh my God, I can't stand all these people suffering. So I just handed it to her. I said, "I'm a lady." Well, at least I'll have a story to tell, which I told. Anyway, you can see sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's less easy to inhabit such categories or to be inhabited by them. I think they're complex social institutions. They do produce a lot of anxiety, which is part of what we've seen on the streets in these demonstrations against gender, against that form of anxiety, against that.
The clear implication that we're supposed to is that we're supposed to understand that Hamas, or indeed Palestinians more generally, send their young children out to play on the beach or in the playground so that they will be killed, and that this is the kind of people they are, that they sacrifice their young, and that the staged death of their children is then used unjustifiably, unfairly against Israel. So much to be said about that form of reasoning. But let me move on before I lose control altogether. At one point, the Israeli government, and I'm almost done here, at one point, the Israeli government, in the person of Netanyahu, defended itself against the allegation of war crimes by pointing out that the general population had voted for Hamas, suggesting, it seemed, that anyone who voted for that party not only endorsed the role of Hamas in its conflict with Israel, but in the very act of voting, or voting in that way, became an active participant in the conflict, became effectively a combatant. So voting is therefore construed as a way of signing up for the armed forces. Now, at this point, the act of voting is on a continuum with an act of war, and so voting for that party becomes a way of becoming a combatant. One loses one's civilian status by voting. Okay, very interesting conclusion that once again establishes the exercise of legal rights as acts of war. But under the condition in which the majority did, in fact, vote for Hamas, that majority is considered to be the party and also to stand for the party, for the people, setting aside the fact that some people voted for Fatah and others didn't vote. Through a series of collapsed identifications, the entire population is fused with the warring faction. The idea of protecting civilian lives becomes unthinkable when there is no concept of a civilian population, right? So if you are able to erase the concept of the civilian population, you are indeed incapable of committing a war crime of this kind. This is perhaps a long-winded way of saying, on the part of the Israelis who make this argument, they all hate us, why should we spare any of them? Okay. So my purpose is in no way to lend support to Hamas. Despite rumors to the contrary, I do not support Hamas, but continue to ally only with nonviolent efforts to approach the political situation in Israel-Palestine. I'm sorry that I have to interrupt my argument to make that clear, but apparently I do. I hope I have. So there's another reason why it's difficult to establish civilians in the scene of bombardment. That has to do with whether, to be a civilian, one first has to belong gender nonconforming and sexually nonconforming people to Tel Aviv. It has to be Tel Aviv. It's not going to be any other place. And to bring them there to show them the rights and freedoms that are enjoyed by gay, lesbian, bi, trans people in Israel. And it's a cultural appeal. It's an anti-boycott appeal. It is one of the stronger appeals that the state of Israel has made to
and to reverse the trend of the boycott. And one thing it does is it splits a certain kind of liberal left on this issue. But we have to just look a little bit and see what precisely is being said. The first thing is being said is that rights and liberties are enjoyed in Tel Aviv late at night by people like you. Okay. Now, if you accept that, and yes, you could accept that, and indeed there are rights and liberties being enjoyed in Tel Aviv late at night by people who are, you know, in some vague way like me. You know, I mean, I don't have romantic ideas of solidarity of that kind anymore, unfortunately. You know, it used to be, oh, so-and-so's gay. It's like, yeah. It's like, no, like, Republican, racist, you know, like, anyway. So, you know, and I do struggle, I still struggle in that movement, and I am part of that movement, and I will always be part of that movement, and I just helped win a great lawsuit in the Inter-American Court in South America, so I'm there. Don't think I'm not. I am. But what does it mean to be appealed to and say your rights and liberties can be, you can, like others really, enjoy your rights and liberties and your pleasures late at night in Tel Aviv. It means that you will go, if you go, and enjoy those pleasures, knowing full well that the entire structure of that city and that country and that economic and political life depends on the systematic disenfranchisement of an entire population of their rights and liberties. And one can overlook it. Oh, I can't deal with that politics. That's too hard. Like, do I have to think about that? I'm just trying to have a good time. Yes, you have to think about it. You have to think about it. And you have to find a good way to have a good time, okay? It's not like anti-pleasure, okay? And Beirut is more interesting if you want to... I don't think there's any comparison. I don't think there's any comparison, okay? Especially late at night, okay. And Cairo also, who knew? Okay. Okay, getting back to that, I want to say...
And so I didn't understand everything you said, but I really appreciated your language and expression. And
Did you like my jokes, though?